This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Matthew Valencia, the voice of Robin, Tim Drake.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review.
Hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUReview.com.
And on your favorite podcasting app.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 404 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, my good friend and brother, our other host, it's Liam. Liam, we are in a very special theme month for the podcast. Mentioned at the end of last week's Elseworlds Tale, we're headed back, and we are currently, for this month, at least for most of this month, taking a look back at the Girl of Steel in honor of her return to the silver screen for the first time in nearly 4 decades almost at this point. It's about 3.5 decades. Don't age me up because
not counting that flashback, but yeah.
yeah. We don't really count that. That wasn't her. That wasn't a solo movie. How about this?
No.
Her first solo appearance, or her first solo titled film. How about that? In
Absolutely.
Decades. So yeah, we're excited to talk a little bit of Supergirl and Girl of Steel month here on the DCAU Review. And with that, we are looking back at a re-review of one of our very early episodes of the podcast with a first part review of what was a 2-part review back in the day.
That's right. We do the really drill down into these, especially those early, let's say pre-episode 100 reviews when we didn't really delve that deep, or at least certainly not as deep as we do now in any of our categories. So we're going to look back at Little Girl Lost Part 1, the DCAU introduction of Supergirl, and we'll talk about all of the differences between her and perhaps the classic Supergirl that everyone's used to in just a moment here. But yeah, it'll be fun. We talked about both of these parts in one episode and one review, and the whole thing probably lasted like 35 minutes or something. So we're, as always, I think we left some meat on the bone, to say the least, when it comes to these 2-part adventures. So excited to look back at part 1 and also revisit our scores and see what we if we agree with our past selves as well, which is always a fun bit of these re-reviews.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was a little shocked at what our scores were. I was pleasantly surprised at our scores. We'll talk about those as we go along here. But we will, of course, re-review this Little Girl Lost Part 1 if you want to hear our original full review. And I think it was a 38-minute episode. So that tells you how much time we actually spent on delving into these categories. Back on episode 57 the podcast if you would like to hear that review, but as you said, we're going to try and do it a little better justice this time, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, maybe a little bit of x-ray vision or microscopic vision even as we go through for this Girl of Steel month here on the DCAU Review. So let's talk about this episode, Liam, which originally aired, and I do remember this kind of being a big deal. They aired both parts the same day. Do you remember the hype about this? I looked on YouTube to find it, but there's no evidence of it. But my mind says that there was like a big promo for this, and it was, since it was presented as an hour long, both parts, that tells me that there was some hype kind of behind this about the introduction of Supergirl to the DCAU and specifically, obviously, Superman the Animated Series.
Yeah, I could really envision that the beat we'll get to later on about the I can't believe it, a Supergirl, and when we get Kara's big reveal in towards the end of part 1 here, I definitely can envision a Kids WB promo that featured that line introducing this episode. I do remember it being there being a bit of ballyhoo behind it when it premiered on Kids WB for sure. So excited to break it down. And as we always say, it's kind of unique to watch these in single parts also, because that's not really the way we ever watched them for the most part, because whether it was revisiting them on VHS or the DVDs, or even for our show the first time around, we always just watch them back to back. So it's always fun to see sort of where the quote unquote cliffhanger falls, even though this was originally presented as one full episode technically.
There we go. Yes, so this episode, if I did not mention, originally aired on May the 2nd, 1998 on the Kids WB Saturday morning program block. We will get to the official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, which, Usually the two-parters have each part has its own synopsis, so we'll get a synopsis for this part one here in just a second. But before we do, we'll remind you listening at home, if you'd like to support the podcast, the best way to do so is to head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and become a supporting member of the podcast today. You can do so by becoming a one-time supporter of the podcast. Send us a thank you over or an encouragement, some caffeine. I could really use some caffeine right now. I wish I had a nice ice cold iced coffee right now to drink, but alas, did not get a supporter to send me that before the show today. So maybe you would like to join us next week so that I do have a nice tall cup of Java, and Liam too, of course. It's not just about me. This is a joint venture. Maybe both of us. You can head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review and do just that. Buy us a coffee. You can join us at a one-time supporter option, or perhaps you'd like to put pen to paper here and really commit to it and let us know how much you really enjoy the podcast. You can become a monthly supporter of the podcast. And if you become a monthly supporter of the podcast, we offer you a litany of different perks. We have 3 different levels. Each level gets you more perks. The top level, though, gets you all the perks and an exclusive perk, that being our Super Friend tier. That Super Friend tier gets the opportunity to ask us a question, hear your question answered on the air each and every week if we select your question. So check that out. We do have a question coming later this episode. We'll check that out in a little bit here. But whether you want to become a one-time supporter of the podcast or a monthly supporter, we invite you, head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, and please consider supporting our podcast today.
Absolutely. And this is the synopsis for Little Girl Lost Part 1, which is written by Evan Dorkin, Sarah Dyer, Paul Dini, and Alan Burnett. Directed by Kurt Gaeta, with music by Lolita Ritmanis and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. Superman rescues and brings home the sole survivor of the lost Kryptonian colony of Argos, the rambunctious Kara, aka Supergirl. Kind of a run-on sentence there. Could have used a period instead of all those commas, but
yeah. They tried maybe a little too hard. Yeah, I'd say it's probably like a C-. It's probably a passing grade, but your parents would be disappointed in you more than likely. Well, we will start our own, and hopefully our parents will not be disappointed in us, Liam, as we review and provide our own plot synopsis for this week's episode. So as the episode states, we start things off with a bit of, I would say, likely an homage to Star Trek. We get a voiceover, kind of a Space the Infinite Frontier type of narration from Clark Kent, aka Superman, who is in fact exploring the universe.
Personal journal. After following the coordinates from my ship's initial flight recorder, I finally retraced the ship's escape route from my home planet, Krypton. Nothing. There's nothing out there but death. A distress signal coming from the edge of the system.
Now, what's interesting to me is, I believe we see in Last Son of Krypton that his spaceship like jumps through a black hole to get to Earth. So we don't have any explanation for if he figured out how to jump through black holes using the ship, or he just spent like a really long time on the spaceship or what have you. But either way, he was able to track the coordinates back to his home planet. And he does indeed find the entire remnants of the planet. Must be a lead-lined spaceship, by the way, because he's not immediately affected by kryptonite, unless it's because he doesn't have the radiation from the sun, and that's what interacts with the kryptonite. Can you explain that to me, Liam, as the resident Superman expert of the team here? Does kryptonite only affect him because of the sun's radiation interacting with the krypton radiation, or what's the deal with this? You know?
I always took it as it's the it's the radiation from the planet exploding that would be harmful to him on any world, whether it was in front of a yellow sun or not. But I'm sure there's probably 9 comics that contradict the words I've just said over his nearly 90-year history in the world of comic books. But yeah, that was kind of my impression. We'll go with the lead line spaceship and maybe put some lead in the space suit as well, since he's out there
I like
walking around, as we see as well.
Yeah, he knew that he might see some big old chunks of kryptonite, and boy, oh boy, does he. So as he's flying around, he's sort of mourning the fact that there is no remnants of anything left, just gigantic chunks of space rock. However, as he is flying around, kind of observing the remnants, he notices a distress signal coming from a big round planet that is not too far from where Krypton once stood. We see Superman is interested in what this distress signal could be. He flies his ship over to this planet, which is just covered in shards of ice, as we learn once he flies down. But in and of itself is pretty frozen solid. We see him fly down and land, start exploring what appears to be what I dubbed the elite space bunker, kind of like how you see the elites apparently have their doomsday bunkers. We know here that apparently this world, which we learned to find out is Argo, the elites here had their own space bunkers for survival. And we actually get a little intro here from someone named Kala, who introduces herself, and she narrates a message, a holographic message explaining who she was. Superman, of course, realizes that the planet itself has no kryptonite radiation on it, which is a plus for him. So he begins searching and stumbles upon this lab. This message from this scientist reveals that she was the chief physician for the planet Argo.
I am Carla Inze, chief physician of Argo City. 5 years ago, Argo was a thriving, vibrant world. But then, without warning, our sister planet, Krypton, was destroyed in a giant chain of explosions. Krypton's destruction tore Argo from its orbit. The resulting devastation destroyed most of our world and sent it moving slowly, inexorably away from our sun. Leaving a few desperate survivors slowly freezing to death. There was nothing my people could do but pray our distress signals would be answered. But now, I can wait no longer. I have taken a desperate last chance to save my surviving family. To my knowledge, we are all that is left of Argo. Please help us.
So we see the message then ends, and Superman looks and finds these stasis chambers. Unfortunately for the inhabitants inside, all of them appear to have been smashed by ice and penetrated, killing the members inside, except for one, which we see is not. And this gives Clark some hope as he realizes inside is a young teenage girl. We then cut back to Earth. So we get nothing in between here, which we'll talk about maybe when we get through our plot here. So we get no explanation of what happens next, although we do kind of put 2 and 2 together here as we see this same girl that we saw in the pod is now on Earth, flying above Kansas, very familiar place for a young teenager to be flying. We see that she's flying with the geese of Kansas, terrorizing some of the livestock in and around the area as she flies in and around them. And then just as she seems to be enjoying herself a little bit too much, a hand reaches up and pulls her out of the sky. It's that killjoy, Clark Kent, pulling her down.
That's enough of that, Kara.
Hey, Clark. It was such a nice day, I thought I'd just, vroom.
What did we talk about? No vroom during the daytime.
I'm sorry, Clark. I mean, it's great staying here with your folks and everything, but I feel so cooped up.
I understand. Believe me.
On Argo, I dreamed about saving my mother and helping my friends. And now that I have the power to help people, why won't you let me?
You need to adjust to life here a little bit more. Just be patient.
So, Clark, will you be staying the night?
Sorry, Ma. Metropolis is having a sudden crime wave.
Yeah, I saw on TV that Intergang's back.
Intergang? What's that?
Nothing you have to worry about.
Who's worried? I was just asking.
They're a bunch of hoodlums with terrible weapons.
Oh, yeah?
They caused Clark no end of trouble.
Really?
Thanks, guys. I gotta go. You be good.
Yeah, feet on the ground, I know. So, Pa, Intergang, huh?
So we then cut back to Metropolis, and we see Lois and Jimmy well, mainly Lois is bemoaning the fact that she is nowhere near someplace that appears to be an opportunity for her to get a Pulitzer Prize. As she's covering an electronics show, she's complaining about the smell of the attendees there, and then complaining about how boring it is and how she can't see any use for her and Jimmy to be there. Jimmy's a little more positive, but we see, wouldn't you know it, Nuns and Dynamite. Just as they begin to start this presentation, we see that two teenagers break in through the side of the building wearing fancy suits and have flying and carrying fancy weapons. They are stealing some of the technology that is in there. We then see Superman quickly arrive and confront the duo. However, we see their weapons are strong enough to at least temporarily disable Superman and give him a hard time. One of them appears to have like freezing power, and the other one has like fire power. So these gauntlets that they're wearing are giving Superman quite the trouble. And even when it seems like he has bested them, they use this piece of technology that they were using that kind of caused the crate that they were trying to steal to fly by sticking something on the side of it. And they stick this thing on poor Lois, who then flies up into the air, and Superman has to chase after her, thus allowing our teenagers to get away. In the melee, though, one of the teenagers seems to have dropped a token of some sort that Jimmy picks up. And this gives maybe Lois and Jimmy a lead for what they might be able to, where they might be able to find out the origins of these teenagers and why they were attacking the electronics show. We then cut to the hideout where these teenagers are at Hobbs Bay, which is a rundown recreation center.
Yeah, we took Superman on and trashed him.
Excuse me, who trashed him?
Excuse me, who did he slam into a parked car?
Now, what's all this fluttering, my ducklings? Your loving Granny doesn't like her babies to quarrel.
Yes, Granny.
An obedient family is a happy family. And a happy family means a happy Granny.
Yes, Granny.
We see they're greeted by the person who we see as the person that has put them out on this mission, and it's none other than that evil maestro or mistress. I'm not sure. Mistress, probably, right? Granny Goodness.
Absolutely. She threatens the young kids to keep them in line and tells them that as long as they keep listening to Granny, everything will be all right. We'll certainly talk more about Granny when we get to voice acting later, but a wonderful debut for her here in the DCAU. At which point we cut back to the Daily Planet, where we see Clark is typing away on perhaps the story about Superman's run-ins with Intergang when he receives a message on an intercom system telling him that his cousin has arrived to see him. Of course, he immediately realizes it must be Kara, as he has her hide out in one of the file rooms nearby. She is wearing a wig and glasses, and despite that, Clark doesn't seem to have a problem telling who it is.
It's me, Kara.
I know.
You saw through my secret identity? Ah!
How'd you get here?
You told me not to vroom, so I ran. Listen, I saw a report about Intergang on TV, and I thought you could really use my help.
Look, I appreciate your concern, Kara, but I don't want you to rush into something you're not ready for. I didn't save your life so you could throw it away fighting some ray gun-toting punks.
But...
No buts. I gotta get back to work. Here's a key to my apartment. Wait for me there. We'll talk later. And walk.
And he is quick to read her the riot act, so to speak, and tell her that she does not belong here, that she's not ready to get into the superheroing family business, and that she just needs to continue to relax despite her protests. And tells him, gives her a key to his apartment, tells him he will meet her there later to discuss things further. And as he walks out, we overhear Jimmy and Lois continuing their conversation with earlier. Jimmy is insisting that he deserves a chance to be an actual reporter still, not just the photographer, and points out that he found that arcade token on the ground and suggests he and Lois go hit up every, as he refers to them, video parlors, which is how a pervert would refer to those.
But Lois, I was right there when Intergang hit. Why can't I help you with the story?
Too dangerous. Stick to the dark room, kiddo.
But Lois...
Can you talk some sense into him?
I've had my fill of teenagers today.
Look, I think one of them might have dropped this. It's a game token. All we have to do is hit every video parlor in Metropolis.
Good. You go, Jim. Have a free game on me.
Okay. Fine.
Kara, of course, being in the file room right inside the door as Lois and Jimmy are talking, decides that she'll take on the assistant role here with Jimmy. She tells him that she's an intern at the Daily Planet, which confuses Jimmy a little bit, but Jimmy never wanted to ever think critically when it comes to a pretty girl wanting to hang out with him. Jimmy is quick to accept this story, and we see them investigating various arcades in the area, and finally they find the right one, and right then and there we see two people that are very clearly the two people from earlier, and they're not exactly being quiet about it, as the boy, who we hear referred to as Trouble, is threatening somebody that has apparently spilled a drink on his brown trench coat, which is barely concealing his Intergang outfit. And Kara uses her X-ray vision and in fact notices one of those wrist gauntlet laser weapons that Clark and Jimmy were telling her about. And so she makes up a reason to have noticed that and convinces Jimmy that they should follow them. They're able to follow them back to the hideout, and Kara, covertly using her super strength, pretends to find a switch on the giant garage door, opens it up, and she and Jimmy head inside. And at which point they're surrounded by not only Granny Goodness, but a ton of Intergang soldiers who are introduced there. Jimmy tries to play it off quite humorously that he and Kara are, fellow street hoodlums that are looking to join the gang.
Now, why have you nosy little mice come calling on poor old Granny Goodness?
My chick, and I heard Intergang was back in biz. Sounded like a good gig. Thought we'd join up.
Bingo!
Let me tell you, tadpoles, how I work. I seek out the lost little lambs society has cruelly abandoned. I take them lovingly under my wings, give them the power to face the cold, heartless world, and kick its butt.
We're in.
But you hardly seem the type. So bright-eyed and soft-skinned. Life has not scarred you as it has my other goslings. Still, we can remedy that.
Kara tries to speak up. She can't take it anymore. She says that clearly Granny's just using all of these kids and that they need to find something better to do with their lives. Despite Jimmy's protests, asking her what the heck she's doing, she won't back down. So Granny orders all of the Intergang members to make her less pretty, as she says. And of course, at this point, Kara springs into action. Her clothes are a little bit damaged in the melee, as she's pretty easily handling herself at first. and then finally she takes a shot from Granny's control rod, and that damages her clothes enough that it's time for the reveal. She rips off the jacket and shirt she's wearing to reveal the Supergirl cape and logo on her chest, to which, as mentioned, Jimmy is very quick to coin the term of Supergirl, as he can't believe his eyes. She tells him to believe it.
I don't believe it. A super girl?
Believe it.
You naughty little monkey. Granny will spank you good.
She has this final face-off with Granny. She's able to actually damage the cosmic rod that Granny is using to attack her and knock her back. Seemingly, the day has been won. Supergirl's here, and she's more than a match for all of these intergang punks. But then Granny pulls out what happens to be a mother box, as we reveal that Granny is not exactly from around here, and she's bringing some friends from her old neighborhood in to deal with Kara, as we see the debuting female Furies walking out of a boom tube, and Supergirl is clearly a little bit in over her head, as it turns out, as we fade to black here for part 1.
Take a nap, Grandma.
Outstanding.
No, it doesn't end that easily, my little ginger snap.
What the heck is that?
She's from Apocalypse.
Where?
The surprises are just beginning, Muffin.
You called, Granny?
Girls, this ninny noodle wants to play rough. Make her last moments special.
Yeah, what an intro, huh? All right, so we'll start off with what our original scores were. I was gobsmacked. I had no idea that we enjoyed the episode this much. I gave it a 9 originally, and you gave it an 8.
Wow.
So from there, we'll talk about as far as the episode is concerned. Now, of course, that's 9 and 8 for parts 1 and 2. As we've mentioned, this is just part 1, so we'll give our temporary. We're not going to rescore this as we do with our re-reviews. We don't rescore things, but we'll kind of, say, hey, how do we feel thus far? And then we'll talk next week if we agree with ourselves with our final scores here. But as far as a lead off for this character, there's some interesting choices I feel like that are made in this episode, in that we see the discovery of Supergirl in space as the cousin planet of Krypton, or sister planet of Krypton, and that introduction. That's a little bit different than, I feel like there have been about 55 different versions of Supergirl in the comics over the years, and explanations for her origins. So that wasn't the, I think, traditional pre-crisis origin for Kara, but it maybe after, was it post-crisis that she became the cousin storyline? It's a little messy for me from my recollection.
Yeah, so I believe the original sort of Golden Silver Age version was, in fact, his biological cousin, her father Zor-El, being Jor-El's brother, and who also happened to be a scientist, who also happened to build a rocket to send his daughter to Earth. And then there was a big marketing push at one point to really nail down Superman and that last son of Krypton nickname. So at one point you got rid of, I think DC kind of made a point after Crisis on Infinite Earths that they wanted to kind of get rid of all the other Kryptonian characters, whether that's the Bottle City of Kandor or General Zod, or in fact Supergirl, who famously died in that Crisis on Infinite Earths event. And so from there, I think there's versions that were like there's like one that's a weird shape-shifting alien clone. There's one that's like Superman's daughter from the future, and then more recently, I guess in the 2000s, Jeff Loeb and Michael Turner did a run during their Superman and Batman run where they reintroduced sort of I guess the original idea that she is actually the cousin of Superman from Krypton. So I think that's still, as far as I know, the current version of her in the comics. So there's probably been 3 or 4 reboots since then. So your mileage may vary, but yeah, suffice to say, at the time, her being another Kryptonian was apparently a no-go. So they came up with the sort of compromise of the idea of being a neighboring planet near Krypton's orbit, and that perhaps it had been colonized by Kryptonians a few generations prior, and then were unfortunately sort of caught in the massive shock waves that would be created if an entire planet exploded. And so that's how we sort of skirted around the No More Kryptonians ban from DC at the time.
Which honestly, I like it, because if you're going to call in the last son of Krypton, having 75 other Kryptonians really is antithetical to that idea, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something to that idea. And I don't think it loses anything, much like the Kents are no less Superman's parents because they're not his biological parents. So similarly, I think you can establish the exact same sort of relationship between Clark and Kara, the cousin, the sort of it really does feel more like a big brother little sister relationship most of the time between those two. And you can establish that without them having to be blood related also. So I think I kind of prefer this version as well. But who knows? I think there's also just something that when it's the original version, some people think that you can't ever mess with that. So I respect that as well. But yeah, I'm fine with her being Krypton adjacent, but not Kryptonian herself. I think that works out fine.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I like the introduction here. I do honestly like the choice to kind of skip over the what happens when you bring her back to Krypton. How does he introduce Ma and Pa to her? How does she learn English? I know that that's one of the things in the Jeff Loeb Michael Turner story that plays out kind of comedically, but also somewhat like traumatically, from my recollection. I think that was also included in the direct-to-video movie that storyline was based on also. But I do like the fact that for this show, and it's crazy because you have 44 minutes or 42 minutes, whatever it is, to kind of tell the story. I guess you could have taken a detour here, but ultimately with what we get in part 2, they wanted to make sure that they got to the heavy duty action in part 2 and some of the other things that we get there. So I think leaving that part out and letting you kind of fill in the blanks yourself as to what the introduction was like from Clark to his parents about finding another girl, what it was like for her to kind of adapt to Earth, to adapt to her powers, because we do kind of see some of those things happen with Mala in the Jax-Ur and Mala two-parter, where she's adapting to the powers and she's figuring out how to use them. And we saw that in Last Son of Krypton, obviously, with Clark as he learns his powers. So did we really need to see that a third time or a fourth time if you count Jax-Ur also getting the sun's radiation? Probably not. So you allow that to kind of fill in some of the blanks with some of these other stories, and the Jimmy and her kind of being parallels in this story that eventually can converge, where they're both frustrated. Their mentors, or the person that's kind of in charge of them, doesn't really see them as an equal. They don't see them as somebody who's prepared to do the same job that they feel like they are chomping at the bit to do, even though she's a teenager and has never done crime fighting, and he's a reporter teenager, or a photographer who's never done real reporting really before. Both of them are kind of like eager to prove themselves that they are able to do some of this stuff that their mentors or their peers are able to do. So I like that these parallels do converge there with Jimmy and Kara here. But It kind of leads to I like the frustration that Lois and Clark get to kind of bond over, where Lois appeals to Clark to try and tell Jimmy to like back off about this investigation, and Clark just throws up his hands and says he's tired of teenagers for the day. Like he's had his fill, just with no explanation for what that means. And Lois just kind of shrugs and lets it go. Very, very funny. So I like that. I like that she's kind of bucking the trend here, and she's being a little bit rebellious. It feeds into the idea that she is a teenager. She still has this idea of wanting to do her own thing and prove herself to Clark. We see obviously that, especially towards the end of this part here, the danger that it gets her in, but we'll see if she's up for the task in part 2 here. But I like that. I like still kind of the stories tying together between Intergang, who we last saw obviously had a big tie-in with Darkseid when Bruno Mannheim was the leader of Intergang on Earth. He's gone now, but we have the resurgence of Intergang. I like the idea of introducing Granny Goodness as this person that is recruiting these runaways and these people that feel to be on the outskirts of society and rejects and such. So she's using that to her advantage to try and manipulate them into giving them power and fame or money or whatever it is that they're looking for. It is this weird kind of creepy, gross parental relationship of like, you didn't get actual love from your parents, so I'm going to show you quote unquote real love, but it's really just in turn using them for their for their essentially for manipulating them to use them as free help. What's interesting, I did not know this, at least I don't remember seeing this, but on the DCAU wiki, they mentioned that part of the original idea for what the storyline was going to be, according to Evan Dorkin, who's one of the 4 writers I think we talked about here, in one of his early drafts. In one of his early drafts, he was going to actually make it so that Granny's whole plan was to recruit these teenagers to then genetically modify them into the growing parademon army on Apocalypse, which is creepy as all get out. And I really, really kind of dig that idea. But I can also understand why he mentions it was ultimately balked at by some of the other producers and decided not to move forward with that. So maybe it would have been a little too convoluted for the story for what they end up with. But I kind of like that idea of her ultimately kind of luring them in, like the big bad wolf in the Red Riding Hood story, where literally dressed up like a granny. I'm sweet, I'm helping you, you're helping me out, but really just kind of ultimately, or maybe it's the witch with Hansel and Gretel, where she lures them in with the candy and turns them into puts them in the oven or whatever. So yeah, that's
yes, it's a little of that. I think it's a little of is it Pinocchio, where the bad kids go to an island and get turned into animals or something like that. I think that might even be mentioned in that. I believe it's from an interview with Mr. Dork and one of our, as you said, 4 writers on this episode. But that is like an evil super villain fairy tale witch is kind of a really fun idea. Maybe it wouldn't have fit in this particular episode, but yeah, I did when I heard that concept, I was like, wow, that is really kind of sick. Like that is really screwed, like messed up in the best way possible.
Yeah, so I kind of wish that had been a part of it, but nonetheless, I do like the introduction of these additional fourth world characters. Obviously, we had some of the big baddies. We have Darkseid that's been introduced, and Steppenwolf, and some of the other smaller Desaad, Calabac, of course, some of the other smaller players, but really expanding the roster here. And if you're going to have a female lead for these 2 episodes, why not introduce some femme fatales also with Granny? Obviously, the female Furies end up playing a big role in part 2, in really trying to, in really being a formidable opponent for Kara, who really handled her own against Granny and the army of teenagers in this first part here. But yeah, I don't know that. So based on part 1 here, I think it's a great intro to the character. I like the cliffhanger that it ends on, where it feels like she's handled her own, but then, oh, just kidding. It's the reveal of the next big boss. It's very video game like, where you feel like you can take a breath because you handled this big army of goons or whatever, but then the whoever the bad guy is like, actually that was just level 1, and here's the next level that you have to defeat. It's 3 of my assassins that you have to take on. So yeah, I think for a first part here, I don't know that I would have been as high as a 9 for the first part for plot, but I think a 7 or an 8 would have been fine. So it's I'm splitting hairs there, but yeah, I'm curious to see for part 2 whether or not I feel a little bit more generous and more like that was an accurate score there. But I would probably settle on a 7 or 8 if I was talking about just this part.
Yeah, I'd probably be in the 6 to 7 range right now. Yeah, I think this first part is so it does feel like a prologue, because I obviously pretty well remember what happens in part 2, but I didn't necessarily realize where the break was. Again, that's a byproduct of never really watching these one at a time, where you go, oh, that's where the that's where the act break is. That's where part 1 ends. It ends kind of suddenly, it feels like, because then you go like, wait, so all of part 2 is like Kara fighting the Furies, and Superman gets captured, and then there's a giant asteroid that gets thrown at Earth or whatever. There's so much going on. So but that's probably for the best. It's probably a good reason why this is 2 parts, because you have time to sit with that initial sort of prologue, like we said, the very Star Trekky thing, and you get into a little bit of Superman's loneliness in the universe that we obviously see explored in other stories as well, and then his excitement when he finds Kara still alive, and then like you said, it kind of becomes this parallel story of both her and Jimmy wanting to be taken seriously by their more adult counterparts, in this case being Superman and Lois. So and then why they kind of find kinship right away, and then stumble into as is often the case when the hot-headed teenagers go running off to solve a problem by themselves, they then very quickly realize they are in a bit over their head, and maybe those adults did have a reason for telling them to to hang back and take it easier. At least Superman did. Lois basically just told him to get lost, which fair, which based on what we have decided is the true character of this version of Jimmy Olsen, fair enough, Lois. I'd be trying to get away from this guy at any chance I could too. So
that's right.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun, but it does really just feel like it's all build, it's all prologue for the big bombastic stuff we know is coming in part 2. So yeah, it's a good first chapter for sure.
All right, Liam, we'll move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. As you mentioned, Coco and Dong Yang responsible for the animation for this week. Director Kurt Gaeta responsible for the direction here. We already talked about our litany of writers for this episode. I'll start off by saying I did miss my beefy Superman. This is the Superman with a longer, like tick-like chin for a lot of the show. So once you get used to that, the TMS Superman is just so great. Everything TMS does is so great, but the TMS Superman is just so great that when you start getting into these Coco and Dong Yang episodes, which I think actually are the majority of the Superman episodes.
Yeah.
Boy, it's just hard to appreciate, or maybe you just appreciate TMS in a whole new way because of that. I don't know.
Yeah, like you said, you certainly settle into it, and nobody's particularly off model or anything, but it is that, and then those little things like, and I like the sequence, but our opening intro to Kara, where it almost feels like she's a Disney princess or something, where she's floating through the air and she's twirling and spinning through the clouds, and she flies back some geese that are flying through the air, and all that. It's a very lovely little segment. But you're looking at the little flourishes and the camera turns and everything, and how the geese are moving while she's flying through them. And it's very hard to not be like, man, TMS would have killed this. This would have been like one of the greatest pieces of animation ever made if they had done this. And it's still solid from our friends at Coco and Dong Yang. But we do get a little spoiled from those TMS episodes or Spectrum back in the original BTOS run, where you look at those and you look at these, and you're like, well, they did their best, and it's solid, but it's not it's unfortunately their greatest crime perhaps in this episode is just not being quite up to task as perhaps the greatest animation studio in the history of Eastern and Western animation, which is hardly their fault.
You know what's interesting is I still think this might be, though, for Coco Dong Yang, this might be their magnum opus when it comes to an animation sequence. The flight sequence when we get introduced to Kara, the way that she flies down and the camera sort of pans around and you see the geese flying, this is all pre CGI too. So this is still hand drawn to my knowledge. So that whole sequence, something today that I think you would see done with CGI, and you just do cell shading on top of CGI, especially the birds in the background. Maybe the character themselves isn't done with that, but the pan, the way that they kind of do a 180 pan of the camera around Kara as she's flying there it's so gorgeous. And interestingly enough, I gave that whole sequence a bonus point for the original review that we did. So in writing this, but I did the review of the episode and took my notes, and then I went back and looked to see what we gave the episode. I was like, oh, I noted in my notes this time, man, that's such a gorgeous shot. I was really impressed with that. And then I looked and saw that I had given it a bonus point when we originally reviewed it. So yeah, that sequence, I don't know if I mean, there might be, but probably top 5 gorgeous Coco Dong Yang sequences that you've seen. Yes, TMS probably would have, made me crap my pants as a result of what they could have done with it. But I think when you're looking at the overall scope of who was animating this and the sequence, well done, Coco Dong Yang, for that sequence. The rest of the episode, it's okay. It's fine. There's some interesting stuff. I like I do think it's interesting that the one intergang teenager, the one who Lashina, I think is her name, she looks just like Dana Tan. She just looks like Dana Tan's character model. And they're all wearing like Black Bolt. They're like inverted Black Bolt suits. Like they even have the little like Black Bolt from Marvel's Black Bolt, as he would be called, with that little Black Bolt thing that he has on his head. They all the suits have them on there. I just kept seeing Black Bolt as a direct result of the of the little thingy on their head. But yeah, I think it's funny. It's maybe played not for enough comedy. The fact that they're walking around in those suits and these giant brown dusters, and they're like, "Yeah, Granny told us we need to lay low." It's like, you guys really aren't doing much to disguise your appearance here, wearing these gigantic brown overcoats and what I picture is the summer, and underneath of it these blue spandex Kirby suits.
Yeah, I do like that design as well. It's Kirby AF to say the least, as is a lot of this episode, to your point. But yeah, it's funny. I would imagine Black Bolt being, I think, coming out of the Fantastic Four book, was probably also a Jack Kirby design. So probably a little bit of a happen, or not an accident that those characters share some DNA. But yeah, getting all the Kirby characters on screen together, always a lot of fun. We know that was such a mission statement of even wanting to do a Superman show. I think was how many of the Fourth World Kirby characters could we squeeze in. So getting to do the Furies, we'll obviously have more to talk about them with the week 2. But yeah, I do love the two sort of teenage hoodlum characters that are with their weird little wrist laser guns, the ice and the fire gun. I always got a kick out of that. I thought that was a clever little way to do that. So yeah, I think this episode looks pretty darn good overall. The sequence where she finally rips off the civilian clothes and reveals the Supergirl outfit, I think is also super iconic. Pun very much intended. I think that's one of the defining images of this show, maybe is that moment. So yeah, great moment there, even though again we don't get to see a ton of Supergirl in the Supergirl suit in action in this part 1. It certainly sets you up for an exciting part 2. So Yeah, my visual score would be theoretically sitting probably around a 7 or an 8 if we were rescoring.
Yeah, and you gave that's not too far off from what you originally gave it, which was a very high 9, but not quite as high as my 10. Apparently, I really loved the way that this episode looked. Again, I
Yeah.
will reserve judgment for part 2 to see if I agree or disagree with myself. I don't think that based on part 1, I would be at a 10. I did love that sequence, but I think now that we've kind of got an understanding of how we score these things, I would probably just give it a lower overall score if I had to go off of part 1 and just give it a bonus point for that flight sequence. Some of the other things that I will mention here. So DCAU wiki provides some context. The brown wig that Kara wears when she first shows up disguised to talk to Clark is apparently based on how she looked in a similar disguise she wore in some of her earliest appearances in the comics. That was her civilian aide disguise there. So I dig that. Always cool to see that. Also, apparently, the Granny Goodness look in the DCAU was based on Boris Karloff in a episode of The Girl from Uncle. So that's a deep cut right there. Boris
Funniest
Karloff.
part is I'm pretty sure that's not the only Girl from Uncle influence design. I think there's something in the Legion Smallville episode that Bruce Timm also mentions as coming from the Girl from Uncle. So that show a profound impact on the DCAU, despite it probably lasting 12 episodes or whatever.
I will also mention the fact that this episode aired, as we said, in 1998, and there is a brief cameo from a well-known, familiar television weatherman. It appears on the Smallville news station. That weatherman, who we'll talk about in voice acting, still on the air as a quote-unquote weatherman today on national television. So. Good for him. He's apparently, I saw, been quoted as being a fan of Batman the Animated Series and the DCAU. So cool that he ends up getting a cameo spot here in this universe. He's not identified as who he's voiced by, so he could just be somebody that happens to be a weatherman, appear to be the same general build and skin color and glasses wearing and all of the same features that the real life one does. So there's no worry. We don't have a Shaq situation here where we have to explain why this guy or how this guy exists in this universe, but a very fun cameo there that we'll talk about in just a little bit here. I would say definitely not at this point at 10 worthy. Probably a 7 would be my score if I was given a score here, but we'll see how this progresses next week. I do like also a couple of the small things that they did with Kara. They really went out of their way. Obviously, it's a Bruce. It looks like a Bruce Timm designed female, larger head, tiny body, especially a Bruce Timm teenager, larger head, tiny body. She's got the gigantic smile, and they did a lot to try and get her to emote things. Her eyes move, she winks a couple of times, she kind of squints. She's doing her best, to be flirtatious with Jimmy, but she's also kind of trying to put on the, trying to charm Pa Kent to give her more information about Intergang. So I do like the design for it too, and the suit itself. That's something else that I think may have been eventually adapted into some of the comics also for a period of time. I don't think it's the more modern. It's not been used maybe in some years, but at least at some point they did adapt this sort of half t-shirt, the blue skirt and the boots. I know there was action figures made of it that were not based on DCAU stuff for a period of time also. So that design made its way out of the DCAU at some point and into the comic section there. So cool design for Supergirl's outfit there. Not the traditional blue Supergirl kind of matching Superman suit there, but something that really feels like she was able to make it her own and does kind of feel like homemade based on the kind of the red ankle boots and the just like a Ringer t-shirt with a Superman logo plastered on it.
Yeah, I love this design. I think it's as far as the full redesigns of iconic characters, I think it's it's right up there with the best ones that came out of this series or out of the whole DCAU. I think it's so iconic, as you said, to the point that it got adapted into the proper comics for quite a bit as well. So yeah, it's a great look. I think especially for a younger Supergirl. I think it makes sense, as we've talked about, I think when we got to those JLU episodes where they kind of redesigned her and drew her up because they established the character was older now. She was in her 20s, so she wasn't, necessarily the little teenager anymore. But I think for like this version, and for a version who's kind of, she wants to be a superhero, but obviously like Clark's not going to make her a suit if he's not even letting her off the farm yet. So it does look like something a teenage girl could cobble together with, the red lace up boots and the little mini skirt and the little cape and everything. So yeah, great iconic look, and one that definitely stands out as far as all of the redesigns we got throughout these DCAU shows.
Absolutely. We'll revisit this again next week, perhaps in a little bit more detail when we see her in more action there. We'll move on to our next category, Liam, which is going to be music. And forgive me, I did not write down who you said was responsible for music this week.
We have the great Lolita Ritmanis credited, at least for part one here.
Alrighty. So, as far as the score is concerned, I think that's really the first thing that I noticed when you intro the episode. Like I said, it's sort of a Star Trek homage, or Space Odyssey type of, or 10,000, whatever it is, 10,000 BC Space Odyssey, whatever it is. The classic sort of celestial themes that come with cinematic space exploration, and we really get that kind of peak here. We get that laid under this monologue that Clark is giving as he's introing and kind of explaining his exploration there, whether he's recording it for his own sort of journal or if it's just for the breaking the fourth wall for our list or our viewers. I like it. It does add to it. It feels like a nice homage to that type of space exploration show that came before it. That kind of continues throughout. It does kind of mellow out and turn a little bit tragic when we, as Superman is exploring Argo and realizes that, or thinks that, there were no survivors because of the ice crushing the pods. It then kind of rejuvenates into something exciting when he realizes that there's life in one of the pods. And then we get this transition from the pods to Kara flying around the sunny skies of Smallville. And we get this really neat triumphant theme that really had me wishing and hoping. I don't know if we're going to hear it again for this second part here. I know there's another flying sequence that happens at the end of part 2 where Supergirl's kind of here to stay, announced as kind of being here to stay. But I really, really liked this theme, and it plays. It kind of runs parallel to the Superman theme. Like, you can tell it's from the same family, but it's not exact. It has its own kind of character to it. Its horns, the flute that plays in it. It really is a unique, triumphant theme in and of its own, and I really love it. And I was like, man, how cool would it have been to bring this back in the future and other episodes with her? And maybe it does. Maybe I just am not recognizing it, or it's not played enough in my head for it to recognize it. But I really like the introduction of this character getting this triumphant theme as like, here she is, this is Supergirl, this is going to be the theme that kind of goes with her in the same way that you're used to the Shirley Walker Superman theme going with him.
Yeah, I that's a great point. I think that how pieces of music can talk to each other and be in concert with each other. I think that's a great point. And yeah, the Supergirl theme when it starts to swell again, yeah, as you mentioned, there's this sort of very dramatic music that accompanies Superman as he's swooping through the wreckage of the planet, and then when he sees her, you sort of hear the strings start to pick up, and then once we see her flying, we get the full theme, and which of course comes back again when she tears the shirt and reveals her costume and everything. So yeah, that Supergirl theme's great. I love that piece of music, and I think that kind of carries so much of the show. And otherwise, yeah, you get some good action beats during the one Superman action sequence we get in part 1 here, where he's fighting off the two inner gang hoodlums. But yeah, overall, just really, really strong. I think I'd probably be, just based off the debut of the Supergirl theme alone, I feel like I'd have to be at a somewhere between an 8 or 9 for part 1, and inching towards a 10 if not.
Yeah. Interesting. We'll see how that goes. And again, I think some of our earlier episodes, we were so reluctant to give higher scores for music for some reason. We were like, oh, it's got to blow us away, or it's got to be something on the level of The Last Laugh, or something that's just sticks in your head and defines the episode, for us not to give a higher score. Because I gave music a 5 and you gave it a 6. So yours was above average, mine was average. For our scores here. I think there's a couple of additional pieces I really like. Once Kara is going up against Granny Goodness, and we see her using the galactic rod to like push, like she's trying to overwhelm her with it, but we see like Kara doing a slow and steady walk towards her, and they cut down to her boots, and you see it kind of her slowly moving forward as the beam sort of tries to push her back, but she's overpowering it, and then she reaches out. Like the music really crescendos there, and then the explosion happens and blows Granny Goodness back, and you feel like it's like, all right, well, this game over. She's beat the big bad boss. And then there's this dread that comes in when Granny pulls out the mother box and opens the boom tube. And there's, Jimmy's freaking out and trying to explain to Kara what's going on. And then you see these 3 massive females come out of the boom tube, and the music kind of swells at that point. Is like, oh, just kidding, we're not out of the woods quite yet, as we get that cliffhanger there. So yeah, I think for this part alone, I'd probably be with the Supergirl theme. I really love that. I think that really sets the tone for the character. It also marries so well with the Superman theme, and specifically that scene of her flying around there. It makes it feel so fun and carefree and triumphant. And then it kind of, you almost get a record scratch. There's no record scratch, but it's almost like a record scratch when Clark lifts up and pulls her out of the air, kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah.
To bring her back to reality. So I really like that too. There's like a kind of a halting of the triumphant Supergirl theme there. So yeah, I would probably be closer to an 8, I think. We'll see how things shake out with part 2 and the music there, but I'm not quite sure what happened with the 5, other than, like I said, we were a little bit less generous with our scores, I feel like, for music in some of these earlier episodes. So we shall see how that all flexes out. Liam, we will move to our final category of the day next, and that is going to be our voice actors and actresses. We have a pretty large cast for this episode, based on, of course, a bunch of brief cameos. We, of course, talked about our celebrity cameo. We'll reveal the identity of that mysterious weatherman here and making his cameo in just a second. And then we've got, of course, some legendary performances, including the introduction of our Granny Goodness here for this week's episode. Let's talk about our voice cast, shall we?
Absolutely. It's a pretty sizable cast here. So talk about some minor roles here. Just one line right at the end of the episode, though we'll certainly talk about her more in part 2. We do have Diane Michelle as Lashina, and making her debut. And then we have voicing the role of Kala Inza, Kara's mother, who puts her and her family into these cryogenic freezing pods, voicing the mother. She gets a nice little monologue here. Folks maybe know her if you're into the more modern audio dramas. She does a lot of Doctor Who audio dramas, and has also done some other voice work, and I think was even in one of the old 90s live action Mortal Kombat films. So she's probably done more work on the stage than anything, but she does have a nice little monologue to open the episode.
Yep, feels very motherly. She does her role. She's very motherly. I like it.
Absolutely. And we do briefly hear from Mike Farrell and Shelley Fabares as Jonathan and Martha Kent. Once again, they're mostly just there for a little exposition to let Clark and Kara have a conversation about Inner Gang and what's been going on there. But always good to hear from the Kents when they stop by, or when Clark stops by home. And as mentioned, Cal, when they are watching the news in the kitchen before lunch with Clark and Kara, they happen to be watching a weather report. And who would we hear from? But as you mentioned, a very famous weatherman voicing what appears to be himself, though he is not named as Al Roker. It is in fact Al Roker, who folks in the U.S., if you've ever had a homesick day, or if you've been a regular morning television watcher at any point in your life, you would likely know Al Roker as I think he's way more than the weatherman. I think he's basically a co-host of the show at this point.
Sure.
But
Also
an American television institution.
Yeah, he's the host of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Usually, he's the guy who said, "Let's have a parade at the beginning of America's Thanksgiving celebration." Our annual tradition here of parading gigantic balloons and floats down streets of New York. So, yeah, it's pretty funny. Like I said, I recently read something not related to this that mentioned that Al Roker at some point mentioned that he was a fan of Batman the Animated Series. So you got to imagine this was a case where maybe an agent reached out, or somebody said, you know what, Al has said some nice and kind things about Batman the Animated Series. Wouldn't it be fun if we just get him in for a quick voiceover cameo here? And here he is playing a weatherman. Who better to deliver the forecast for Smallville than a real life weatherman slash television personality, right?
Yeah, just a fun, very fun little cameo there. And then playing our villains of the piece, we'll talk about our two intergang characters first that we spend most of the episode with, that being Julia Cato or Cato as Amy, who folks would know from things like Rugrats, and as well as more recently things like Ultraman and the Curious George animated series. She's done quite a bit of voice acting work over her career, and she's paired with the great Scott Menville, who folks would know from what really, in the grand scheme of things, was a speck of time playing Robin in the old Teen Titans show, a mere 5 seasons. And from for the last like 15 years, he's been playing Robin in the long running, more comedic take on the Teen Titans Go show. Still playing that character, or a version of that character, to this date. New episodes still coming out at time of original recording. Those two are kind of a fun duo. It is distracting because as soon as he talks, I'm just like, oh, it's Robin from Teen Titans. That's not his fault, but he just has such a noticeable, that sort of high pitched rasp to his voice. So noticeable. But he and Miss Cato or Miss Cato playing off of each other, they do a good job being the sort of the teenage hoodlum characters, giving Superman a hard time, and then having to kind of go back and they talk a big game when they're on their own, and then as soon as Granny's in the room, they're kind of tucking their tails between their legs, metaphorically.
Yeah, it is certainly distracting to hear Mr. Menville, just because his voice is so iconic. We said the same thing when he later plays one of the Royal Flush Gang in the Justice League episodes. So it's not just relegated to this specific role here. He just has such a unique voice, and we've talked about it over and over again. When you're used to hearing one actor do a particular voice for a pretty iconic character, it's then hard when he really hasn't changed up the way that he is doing the voice, or he continued using that same voice to voice Robin. There's a little harder edge, I guess, when he does Robin, but it's similar enough where it's like, yeah, this is the same guy. Not bad. It's not a bad performance. I do like how, as you mentioned, he talks a big game, and he's talking, he's talking to Miss Cato's character, giving this kind of back talk to her, because she's telling him that he needs to chill out, and then he's like talking this big game, and Granny shows up, and he's like terrified of her, which is really, really funny. So yeah, there's some good stuff from him. I believe he shows up again maybe in part 2, so we'll see how he does in part 2 as well. But this is a solid outing, although he's a victim of just being so darn good at the role that he was more well known for.
Absolutely. And we'll mention here, of course, the great Dana Delaney. Not a ton for her to do, though she does get a couple funny wisecracks about having to cover this electronics expo that they're at when Intergang attacks the first time in part 1. That's quite a bit of fun. Her interplay with Jimmy and Clark is always fun. And then yeah, we will talk about here. Actually, I think we should probably talk about Superman here because he has the least to do of our remaining characters, I think. So of course Tim Daly here as well. He's got a good role because, like we said, it is really more of a big brother role. He's sort of having to be the disciplinarian, trying to keep Kara's youthful spirit from getting her in trouble. So he's kind of playing the the tough guy, the bad cop, so to speak, here, which is kind of funny to hear him talking down to her a little bit and being just kind of overwhelmed by her energy and not really knowing what to do with her is kind of fun. And I think it adds a little dimension to Mr. Daly's version of Superman. To just he's just got this kid with so much energy and he's just so unprepared to be in charge of a teenager.
Yeah, it's like an 80s film where suddenly a dad has to start taking over the role of being a father, and some guy who's not a dad has to take the role of being a father. Yeah, definitely see some of that here with him suddenly not even getting to experience toddlers or middle school age children. He just went from having no kids to all of a sudden being in charge of a teenager and all of that comes with that. So yeah, I like that he's immediately flabbergasted. The line that he gives with where Kara shows up at the Daily Planet and she's absolutely shocked that he sees through her disguise. She goes, "It's me, Kara," and he goes, "I know." He's just so dry and so annoyed. And she's like, "You saw through my disguise or saw through my secret identity?" So funny. Just dry and deadpan and just not the speech that he gives her when he pulls her into the file room is really great. So yeah, there's some good stuff here. Not a lot for him to do, but the little bits that we get where he does get a little bit of parental dynamic to his performance there is pretty fun.
Absolutely. And then we'll talk about our other big villain introduced here in part one, that of course being the great Ed Asner, the late great Ed Asner, unfortunately. But we've talked about him quite a few times over the years on the show, but folks would maybe know him best in addition to all of his other voice acting work, including in the DCAU, playing Roland Daggett in the original BTOS, as well as I believe he's Hephaestus in Justice League Unlimited as well.
Mm-hmm.
But he is also, of course, he's Santa in Will Ferrell's Elf, and tons of, I believe he goes back to the Mary Tyler Moore Show and other old school, plenty of on camera work in addition to his voice acting as well. Just an all time great actor. Of course, plays the crotchety old man in Up, if you're a more recent Disney animation fan as well. So but this is like Hall of Fame. If you eliminated like everything else that Andrea Armano ever did as a voice and casting director, if you just put in that she thought to use Ed Asner as Granny Goodness, that alone, she should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know what Hall of Fame would put her in there for casting Ed Asner as Granny Goodness, but she should be in it.
Yeah. We very famously, I don't know if it was this episode or one of the subsequent episodes of his appearance, but for a time when there was a Fourth World New Gods movie in production, we were angling for a grassroots plan to get Mr. Asner cast as Granny Goodness. I think it just would have been absolutely perfect for the role, just because his voice and the way that he emotes embodies this character so well. Some of the phrases and turns of phrases that he uses, when he called Supergirl a ninny noodle, I lost it. Like at another point, he calls her a ginger snap. I like the line where he talks about he's explaining to Jimmy and the disguised Supergirl at that point, but what she's doing when recruiting people. She says she takes in the little lost lambs that society has cruelly abandoned and take them under my loving wings, giving them power to face the cold, heartless world. And then like this turn in her voice, or in his voice, where he goes, "and kick its butt." It's just so, it's delivered so well. Yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had with this performance. What a absolute perfect casting. the amount of home runs that Shirley Walker and I guess the producers were probably in some. We always say Shirley Walker as the casting director because that's her title, but the people that had the idea of Ed Asner being cast in this role and then him coming in and absolutely he understood the role. He understood the assignment, as the kids used to say. Like, he knew what was being asked of him. And he has like the slightest bit of femininity to him, which is interesting because if you look at Mr. Asner, he does not scream femininity in the way that he looked, but he was able to pull off just like the slightest little bit of softness to the performance, but then turned on this really gravelly, disgusting, like old woman turn to it when he needed to. So yeah, phenomenal casting choice, phenomenal performance. The Ninny Noodle line is the one that takes the cream of the crop here for me, though. Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we always point out, he loves to this version of Granny loves to call her name calling is almost exclusively just calling you types of food. So there's a lot of like lamb chop and muffin and all of that in here as well. So just like taking those little anachronisms that a bunch of real grandmothers would likely have when they were talking to their grandchildren and just making it so sinister and weird and funny is just such a testament to Mr. Asner as an actor and to everyone else involved as well. But yeah, we'll get to our main stars here. Probably one of the bigger roles that we've talked about other than Dollar in the Bad Episode Jar, Superman's pal, for David Kaufman as Jimmy Olsen. Yeah, he does a good solid job in this episode. Again, we're kind of building up this parallel, as you said, between him and Kara, who are both looking to step out of the shadow of their older mentors, with Lois in his case and Superman in hers, and so he's kind of complaining and he does actually have a good idea, which is to track down this arcade. It's just that no one's really listening to him. So I think he does. This is probably one of Mr. Kaufman's better episodes as Jimmy, or at least ones where he's got the most to do for sure.
Yeah, he's pretty solid here. He plays off. I think there's some passion that he gets to deliver in the way that he's upset that Lois isn't taking him seriously, and he's going to go out on his own. And then there's this, we always joke that he's a creepy little pervert, but the fact that he gets sort of taken aback by Kara talking to him and having some sort of interest in him, and him being a little confused because she has this backstory that she's an intern at the planet and he doesn't know who she is, so he's not quite buying that story. But then the reveal when she turns out to be super ... girl question mark, that line is delivered perfectly, and as you mentioned, a pretty iconic line in and of itself. So we like to give the character of Jimmy Olsen a hard time in the DCAU because quite frankly he deserves it. But yeah, as far as this episode is concerned, really good stuff from Mr. Kaufman is for what we needed for this episode. A lot of different emotions that he has to show here, and I also like his fake like tough guy accent that he puts on at the end when he's trying to fool Granny into thinking that they're there to join the gang and not just investigating.
Yes,
there's some good stuff there.
Absolutely. And then we will round it out talking about our Supergirl in question, that being Nicole Tom, who we've talked about quite a few times over the years on the show. But yeah, as her first introduction as this character in this here episode, man, what a great job she does. Just it feels like, and again, it's a credit to her, it's a credit to Andrea Romano, it's a credit to the writers of the episode. It feels like they really knew what they wanted this version of Supergirl to be. This doesn't feel like, oh, the network wants us to, or the toy company wants us to sell toys to girls, so let's cram a Supergirl into this. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like they had a specific idea. We talked about how she plays off of Clark, and then how you see her and Jimmy get along as well. And Miss Tom's voice acting performance is obviously a huge part of that, because I think just nailing this youthful energy and that desire to grow up too fast that all teenagers have, you really feel it in her performance, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's solid. I think there's, like I said, there's a bit of innocence to her. There's a little bit of rambunctiousness. There's a little bit of rebellion in the way that she kind of talks. She's a little mischievous. That she's got a lot of different emotions that she gets to show off here as a late teen. In this character, so yeah, I really like the performance that Miss Tom does for this character. It's one of those voices that multiple people have played that role since her. And I don't think that I don't think it's at the same level as a Kevin Conroy's Batman or Lauren Lester as Dick Grayson or even Tim Daly as Superman or George Newbern as Superman. But I do think that there is something to be said with this version of this character, this teenage version of Supergirl. That voice goes like that's the voice that I would assign to that character. Maybe if it's a little bit older, that you could cast a different voice, but I think for a teenage Supergirl, this is the right voice for this, and she does a really great job. Like I said, she's light, she's bubbly for the most part. There is a little bit of mischief in the way that she's kind of trying to get into trouble. Her disbelief that Clark could see through her disguise is very funny. That whole back and forth there, and then charming, like she's charming, trying to charm Jimmy into maybe going beyond even what he's comfortable with doing when it comes to the investigation side of things, which I like. So yeah, I like that. We get more of her kind of in a more serious role in part two. I know coming up here, but yeah, a lot of great stuff here. I would say unsurprisingly, this was the highest rated category for both of us for that original scorecard. We both gave voice acting a perfect 10 out of 10 originally. And I got to say, thus far, I don't think there's much that's going to sway me from not agreeing with myself. I think a 10 out of 10 would be where I am thus far. It would have to be, and we know that we have some big heavy hitters coming in part two, specifically Michael Ironside as Darkseid shows up next week. So we know that we have some additional big guns here to pull out next week, and more Granny goodness and more from Nicole Tom and the rest of our lead here. So yeah, I kind of say I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say I don't think that number is gonna change next week for me. What about you?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's such a strong start, and like you said, some of our favorite great DCAU voice actors aren't even in this part one, and it's already so fantastic. And so it's hard to imagine it going down from there. So yeah, I think we're pretty much in lockstep with our past selves in this category at least.
Absolutely, Liam. So just to let everyone know, if you weren't totaling those up, our scores originally were 35 and 33 out of 40. That was with my one bonus point also. So yeah, I'm interested to see how we feel at the end of next week's episode. Like I said, that felt really high to me. I was kind of shocked. And I think based on the animation scores here, maybe being a little bit too excited about that flight sequence. From part one, maybe I was a little overexcited, but again, that's the beauty of kind of looking back at these things as a single part, looking next week and giving a review of the final score, deciding, hey, as a whole though, what do we see here? Does it make sense that our scores, once we kind of look at both parts together here? So yeah, looking forward to checking that out next week to see where our scores stand there and if we end up disagreeing with ourselves.
Absolutely.
It's not often that we do, I will say that. Thank you everybody for tuning in this week. We appreciate you listening and checking out this episode. We'd love for you to support the podcast and let us know what your thoughts are of this two-part episode. You can give us your full thoughts of parts 1 and 2 if you want to this week, or wait until next week and give us part 1 this week and part 2 next week. Let us know what you think. A couple of ways to interact with us. You can join us on social media at DCAU Review. We're on all the Twitter and Twitter copycats pretty much. So check us out there if you want to. We will, as we always say, we will disclose we are more active on Twitter X and Instagram than anything else. But the other platforms that you can use, if we're on there, we'll eventually get back to you. We promise we're not ignoring you. We just don't check those other ones as often. You can also, of course, if you're listening on Spotify and you don't want to use social media, you can comment on the individual episodes. Spotify lets you leave comments directly. Not only will that will we see that and eventually get back to you and interact with you with that. But it also helps us out because the more comments on an episode, the better it does in the algorithm, from my understanding, the all powerful algorithm. So thank you. If you do listen, if you want to leave a comment there, that helps us out. While you're there, if you're listening on Spotify, leave us 5 stars in the app. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave us 5 stars there. And remember, if you listen on Apple and you leave a review for us, 5 star review specifically, and you live in the US, I'll send you a little thank you gift just for leaving that 5 star review. If you leave a nice little paragraph about what you like about the pod, or even not a paragraph, just a nice sentence. 5 stars is all we're asking for. You can also, we ask that you consider supporting us on YouTube. Head over to youtube.com. Actually, head over to DCAUreview.com. You'll find all the links to all of our socials. You can all in one spot there. You don't even have to worry about show notes or finding the links and the notes or anything like that. It's all at DCAUreview.com. Head over there, find the link to the YouTube page. Go there, like our videos, subscribe to the channel. Even if you're not consuming the podcast that way, the more subscribers that we get, the more it helps us. We're still working on getting enough of a following there to get some of the extra perks that you get for having a YouTube channel. So please consider following us there. If you have a YouTube account, that helps us out a lot. Like the videos when it comes out. As we also said at the beginning of the episode, you can support the podcast by becoming a supporter over at buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, which you can also find that link at DCAUreview.com. And if you become one of our supporters at the Super Friend tier, you have the opportunity to submit a question. And then if we select your question, we'll read it on the air and give you an answer to your question. And we do have a question this week from our good buddy Zach, who is a supporter at the Super Friend tier. And Liam, what is Zach questioning us about this week?
That's right. So Zach's question for Little Girl Lost Part 1 is about a Daily Planet's cub reporter. He gives his full government name, James Bartholomew Olson. And he says when Jimmy first meets Kara and she says she's an intern at the Daily Planet, he says that he thought he already knew all of the interns.
Oh no.
And Zach is hypothesizing that perhaps Jimmy knows all of the female interns, but it seems unlikely that he'd know every single intern working at such a giant newspaper like the Daily Planet. So he wanted our thoughts on that. And it's like, yeah, of course, he's a creep. He is logged and cataloged every single of young female page assistant, secretary, reporter, all of the above, janitor, anyone that he thinks he has even the slightest chance of a shot with. You know that old hound dog Jimmy Olsen is sniffing around whenever there's a new lady working at the Daily Planet.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Yes, thank you, Zach. Excellent observation there. That's feeding into the podcast lore that I love, so I appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with you. There is no way for him to know in an organization. Have you seen the height of the Daily Planet building? I'm assuming they don't otherwise say there's like retail space in that building. It's the Daily Planet building. And it's based on a time when newspapers were like a huge conglomeration. They also have maybe like the news media, like the Angela Chen news station, maybe in that same building. I don't remember if that's a separate building or not, but even it's like a news center. It's not like other offices. So that's like a 40-story building. So you got to imagine there's just at least like maybe there's a parking garage there for the first, I don't know, 10 stories, right? So let's say 30 stories, and he knows every single intern on 30 stories of, that not possible. Not possible. What is possible is that he like hacked into the HR files and figured out and collected all of the names of the female pages or interns and decided to keep a meticulous log, and that's how he knows. He probably has like picture references. He's a photographer. He's a creep. Probably made them take pictures with him on the first day. Yeah, he's got all kind of sleazy things in his sleazy brain. So yeah, I agree with you. No way, Zach, could he know every single female or male page, but he probably knows all the females because he's a creep.
Jimmy Olsen definitely a wear my hug at guy.
He thinks he can get away from it because he's also a 19-year-old kid, apparently. But yeah. And if you want to submit a question just like Zach and become a supporter of our ever-growing list over at buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review, we invite you to head over today and join at the Super Friend tier at buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. Liam, as we've discussed here, this is the end of the episode here. We're winding things down, and we will be back next week with an exciting review of part 2 of this cliffhanger episode here. We got some big things coming next week. Already alluded to it. We got some dark side showing up. We got Superman going missing. Kara's got to do things on her own. It's a pretty big episode here. Plus, what happens when Superman finds out that Kara completely went against his wishes and decided to become a superhero? Oh, things are not looking good for the Girl of Steel, huh?
Absolutely. If she thought Granny Goodness and the Female Furies were bad, she's about to come face to face with as bad as it gets in the DCAU. So excited to jump into Little Girl Lost Part 2 and see what we think, and if we continue to agree or disagree, as the case may be, with our past selves.
Absolutely. Can't wait. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU.
Bye-bye.
I lost the screen. Hold on.